You're about to learn how to play Magic the Gathering. Magic is a turn-based strategy card game where the objective is to reduce your opponent's life total to 0. Your goal is to learn to play through an entire game of Magic. Before you play Magic, you need an opponent and a deck. Like poker, Magic has different variants, each of which would have different deck requirements, but for this video, we'll focus on 60 card constructed decks. But what are these decks made of? According to Scryfall.com, Magic has over 20,000 cards, all cards in the following attributes: name, mana cost, art, typeline, set symbol, text box, artist credit, collector's info, and in the case of creatures, power and toughness. Let's go through these. The name is exactly what it sounds like. All cards have unique names, and they can have up to 4 copies in your deck, with the exception of basic lands. The mana cost indicates how much of your in-game currency, called mana, you need to spend to play that card. Lands don't have mana cost, because they are what produces this mana. Art is just art, no functional purpose. The type line determines what type of card you're looking at. According to Wizards of the Coast, the creators of Magic, there are 7 card types in Magic that you need to worry about: land, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, creature, sorcery, and instant. A set symbol gives you information about when the card was made and how rare it is. Text box contains additional abilities that the card has. Some cards also have flavor text, additional italicized text that lives in the text box but has no functional purpose. Collector's info also has no functional purpose, but contains an artist credit and the card's serial number. Finally, some cards have power and toughness, which signify how much damage they deal in combat and how much they can take before dying. Next, let's talk about card types. There are 7 card types. 5, called permanent, stay on what is known as the battlefield when you play them, and 2 are single-use effects before heading straight to the discard pile or graveyard. We'll start with permanents. Lands are important because they allow you to play your other cards. They do this by producing mana, the main currency of the game. During each turn, you may play up to 1 land, and tap each of your lands for mana, which you can use to pay for spells and abilities. Tapping a land means turning it sideways to indicate you've depleted it for the turn. All your cards untap at the start of your turn. Generated mana is temporarily stored in the mana pool before being spent on costs. There are 6 types of mana that can be produced: white, blue, black, red, green, and colorless. Each of these can be used to pay for costs in their respective color or for generic costs. It is important to remember that land is not synonymous with mana. Lands merely produce mana. Decks are usually at least 1/3 lands because they are needed to play all the other cards. Next, we'll look at enchantments, which are comparatively quite simple. You play them, and they usually have some static effect on the game. Some enchantments have the aura subtype. In this case, they will specify a permanent that they can be attached to, and when that permanent leaves play, the aura will go to the graveyard. Artifacts are like enchantments, but generally don't require colored mana to be played, and often have abilities that require them to tap. Many artifacts can also tap for mana in the same way as lands, but do not count toward your 1 land per turn limit. Planeswalkers come with a list of useful abilities and their own self-contained currency to pay for them. This currency is called loyalty, and all planeswalkers enter with an amount dictated by the bottom right corner of the card. They usually have 3 abilities that either add or subtract loyalty. You can use one of these abilities on each of your turns, provided you have enough loyalty. You will need to defend your planeswalker from your opponent, as they can attack it with creatures or otherwise damage it to remove loyalty equal to the damage dealt. When they have no loyalty, planeswalkers go to the graveyard. As repeatable sources of damage to reduce your opponent's life total, creatures are possibly the most important card type. They have the aforementioned power and toughness, and an entire phase of the turn dedicated to them. On your turn during this phase, creatures can attack, and your opponent's creatures can block. Creatures cannot attack other creatures directly, and can't attack or use their tap abilities on the same turn as they've been played. Attacking with a creature requires you to tap it, and tapped creatures cannot block. Multiple creatures can be assigned to block a single attacker. When in combat with one another, creatures deal damage to each other equal to their power, and if a creature's toughness is reduced to 0, that creature goes to the graveyard. Damage on creatures heals at the end of turn. Next, we'll talk about spells that have single-use effects. Sorceries are simple. They do what they say in the rules text and then go to the graveyard. Instants are the same as sorceries, except they have the ability to be played at times you wouldn't normally be able to play spells. Other spells can only be cast during your main phase, while the stack is empty. The stack is the system that dictates what order things happen in Magic. Every time a spell or ability is used, it is placed on top of the stack, and players have a chance to respond with their own spells and abilities, after which the stack resolves newest to oldest. Instants can be played in response to other spells and abilities before they take effect, and the instant effect will resolve first. Now we know everything about the cards, let's talk about the gameplay. Magic is played in turns, which are broken down into phases and steps. The phases look something like this. Starting phase. Untap step. Things untap. Spells and abilities cannot be activated here. Upkeep. Effects that refer to your upkeep happen here. Draw step. This is where you draw a card from your deck. Main phase. Cast spells and play up to 1 land. Combat phase. Beginning of combat step. Upkeep, but for combat. Declare attackers. Active player announces what creatures are attacking. Declare blockers. Defending player declares which creatures are blocking. Damage step. Block creatures deal damage to their blockers, and vice versa. Unblocked creatures deal damage to the defending player. End of combat step. End step for combat. Main phase. You cast more spells and play a land if you haven't already. End phase. End step. Effects that reference your end step happen here. Cleanup step. Damage dealt to creatures is healed and the active player discards in excess of 7. To begin the match, randomly select the starting player. Each player shuffles decks, draws 7 cards, and gets 20 starting life. The starting player takes their first turn, but skips drawing their first card. Players now alternate taking turns, drawing cards, playing lands, casting spells, and attacking with creatures until one of their life totals drops to 0. Congratulations! You just learned how to play the world's most complicated game, as reported by the MIT Technology Review. It may take some getting used to the semantics, but Magic is incredibly fun once you get the hang of it. Thanks for watching.